Welcome to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. We have 20 minutes of shop talk with amazing visionaries, and then we have 20 minutes of answering questions from you, the global audience. And I know you're going to have a lot of questions because we have with us like a titan in the field of cinematography, Anthony V. Richmond. Hello, Anthony.
Hey, how are you? Good
Oh,
morning. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. It's so great to see you. So we were just talking, and I have a big question. You know, you've been a DP your whole life. Your sons are DPs. How do you classify what are the characteristics of a DP, and what is their sensibility, and why are they so cool?
Well, I mean, I think they're cool because it's a really wonderful job. I think that the most important thing a DP does, his real role, is to put the director's vision on the screen. Singly the most important thing, because any given director, it may take him 2, 3, even 5 years to get it to a point where a movie is greenlit. And over those years, he's probably been polishing the script with the writers, and he's got a very strong vision of how he wants his movie to look, to feel, to smell. And that is your main job. And you can take his vision further, and that's where the collaboration starts. And also DPs work much more than directors.
Well, because DPs usually have many more man hours on set than the director. But there's also this wonderful humanity I find with great DPs, and as well as being creative and artistic, there's a humanity and sort of a kindness. And so I just wanted to hear, like, what do you look for in, say, when you're suggesting DPs for jobs, or what do you think makes a great DP?
Well, I mean, I think what makes a great DP is to do a great movie. But I mean, I think in the interview process, I mean, a director's going to choose someone who's not only a good. All the DPs he's interviewing are going to be good DPs. There's no doubt about that. Someone who's going to have his back, someone who he's going to collaborate with, and a DP fights a lot of directors' battles for him, especially with line producers and production managers. Ordering equipment, things like that, they don't want you to have. And it's a wonderfully important job. I mean, only second to the director. I mean, you're in charge of a huge crew, rigging crews, second units, A&B camera. And I think that you've just got to be really understanding. And there's going to be many times when a director's lining up a shot, or you're lining up a shot with a director, and he wants to do it one way, and maybe that's really the wrong way to do it. But I mean, so if that's the case, what you do is you take the director around the back of the set and whisper in his ear and say, "Listen, don't you think this might be a better way of doing it?" And if he says, "No, I want to do it my way," then you let it go. You let it go, because there has to be one captain of the ship. I mean, there's times when I've seen in my career when I was an assistant, DPs and directors arguing about a setup or a shot, and you just can't do that, So you've got to be very, understanding on those things.
And how did you go about developing your artistic eye? Where did you go to art school? Did you
No, I left school. I left school when I was 15. I didn't like school very much. And I come from a very ordinary family, a very sort of working class family. My mum was a mum and just looked after my dad and I. And my dad was a taxi driver. And the two great things he loved in life were soccer or football, and movies. And so he would take me to the movies once or twice a week, and I just fell in love with movies. And there was one particular movie I'll never forget, because I saw Shane. And I thought, my God, I just loved the way the movie looked. And I thought, that's what I want to do. Now, I had no idea how to go about it. And I managed to get a job at B.A.F.T.A News as a runner, running up and down Wardour Street with cans of film to the labs, because we put out 2 newsreels a week. And then eventually they had to give me a job. They had to give me so they wanted me, I got a union ticket, and they wanted me to be a news cutter. And I didn't want that. So I went round to the Union Hall, which is around the corner in London. And there was a job advertised for a loader at Danziger Studios, which is a really crappy little studios in Elstree, run by the Danziger brothers, who also own the Mayfair Casino. And they funneled some of the money into that. And I worked on the feature unit, and we did one feature every 9 days. So they were all truly, truly dreadful. But it was a great learning experience. And then, I was I was lucky enough to, I then got a job at Hammer Films, made all those great Hammer horror movies. And I was permanently employed as a clapper boy, or second assistant, as they're called now. And, it was always visiting DPs. And this one DP came in, John Wilcox, who was for some unknown reason, he liked me, and he took me to Israel with him on a movie. And so I was very lucky as an assistant working on very big movies. And then I eventually got onto Dr. Zhivago. And I have to say that, I think the great thing about film school is, I worked my way up. It's very hard to do now. I think that's really the best way to go. But it's almost impossible now because there's no time. I mean, when I was in my 20s, the longest job I ever did was a clapper boy. I was a clapper boy for about 5 years. There was a lot of time to look and learn. And I was taking under the wing of Nicholas Rogue, John Wilcox, this DP, and Freddie Young, 3-time Oscar winner. And then David Lean took me under his wing. And I couldn't be where I am, and I would never have got a start to my career if it hadn't been for those 4 people,
So when you're on set at those times and you're just starting out your career and idolizing the DP, when you're standing there as an assistant, what are you looking at? How are you teaching yourself?
Well, I was looking at how they put the lights and what they were doing. We had plenty of time in those days. And also in those days, DPs were gods. And when I say gods, I mean, you spoke when you were spoken to, I mean, and I was lucky enough with the DPs I worked with, I could ask them questions, but there was a lot of time to look and learn, And then also, we used to go to dailies the next day, either in the evening or at lunchtime, and the whole crew would go to dailies. So you saw what was happening. That all fell by the wayside, Then they stopped seeing dailies. They send out crappy DVDs, and sorry, is the ring? Is that okay?
I know. Suddenly, I had a ring. Yes, I'm the bad person with the ring. But when you were, did you try to enforce dailies on your sets when you were DPing?
Everybody wanted to go. Yeah, I mean, we used to go. I became a DP in 1967. I shot my first feature film in '67. I was very young. I was 24, 23. And it was just certainly the camera crew used to go to dailies, and then the makeup people would come, the hair people, and it was wonderful to see the work, and it was a print you saw, and that's another way, as an assistant, I used to go, and that's how you learn. You saw what they were doing on set, and you go onto set, it was blazing light, and it was supposed to be night. What's all this about? Then you're going to see dailies all nice and dark and moody, It was great, but it was great when it was on film and before there was video playback, because no one knew what the hell was going on, only the DP did.
Right, that's why it was so magical.
It really, what you're right, it was magical. It's not, that side of it is not magical anymore, But I mean, but I have to say that I took to digital quite early on. I really liked digital. I mean, I still like film, but I really liked digital because, if you've got a great DIT with you, and you've got a couple of really, really good monitors, you can really judge things now, whereas you couldn't before. I mean, on film, you didn't go to daily, so you never knew where you were. So I do like digital for that respect, and there's some really wonderful cameras out there now.
But do you feel like everybody's a backseat DP because you have the monitor and because everyone has an opinion and everyone can see it live?
Well, sort of, but I mean, only I always have a tent somewhere near very close to the set where the DIT is, and I don't let anybody in. It's as simple as that. Don't let hair or makeup come in because they don't really know what they're looking at, and directors don't even want to come in, But I've been very lucky. I've had a wonderful, throughout my career, I've always had a wonderful time with directors. And I've worked with a lot of first-time directors, which I really like. I really like working with first-time directors.
Did you have to do interviews for those jobs, and how do you train your students now about doing interviews for jobs?
Well, I mean, excuse me, everybody's different. Yeah, I did have to do. I mean, like the movie you saw the other night, Walk on the Moon, which used to be called The Blouse Man. Now, Tony Goldwyn called me and he hired me over the telephone. I'd never met Tony, but he just liked some of my work. I mean, basically, everybody refers back to, I suppose, Don't Look Now, you know, that was one of my, that was a great movie. And also, it was an extremely low budget movie. And we shot it in 6 weeks and 4 days. 6 weeks in Venice and 4 days in London. And Venice, I've shot in all sorts. I've been in the Arctic Circle twice. I've been to the Sahara Desert shooting movies. I've been to Australia shooting movies all over Australia. Venice is singly the hardest place in the world to shoot a movie because there's no trucks. Everything goes by barge.
Mm.
You know, the generators on a barge, all the lights are on barges, you know, and then, you know, you'd be shooting in these big old palazios and Don't Look Now we were shooting, and suddenly all the lights go out and everybody started panicking and the electricians would start running. And what would happen is all the gear or the generator was on a barge, you know, they either had to get it out of the canal under the bridge or in because of the tides. Because once the tide was up, we couldn't move it. So it's very hard. There were no condors in those days. They used to put ladders across the canals, and it's just hard. It's really hard. And the thing is, a lot of the times there, you can't get the light where you want them. It's where you can get it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked out quite well.
But I wanted to find out, because this is helpful for DPs to hear, especially from someone who's worked with so many great directors. Like, what did you say in that interview with Tony to secure the job, or was it just based on your work?
Well, it was based on my work.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I told you the other day, then what happened is we because he was in New York. I was shooting a movie. I was shooting a movie, I think, in New Mexico, and I went straight from New Mexico to Montreal. That's where we were prepping the movie, and then we shot it in the Laurentian Mountains, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I said, "How do you want to work?" He said, "Well, I don't know. I've never done it before." I said, "Well, let's have, you know, we'll have dinner every night for 10 nights. You can pay the bill. Bring your script, and I want you to go through no more than 10 pages of script over dinner. I want to know how you want your movie to look, to feel, and smell. I want to get inside his head." And that worked very successfully, you know. And then the night before we started shooting, we had a final dinner, and we were in the Laurentian Mountains then. And he said, "How are we going to go about this?" I said, "How do you want to go about it?" He said, "Well, I don't know. I've never done it before." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. When we start a new scene, we'll go on the set together, you and I, and the continuity person can sit on the floor, and you just walk through the scene for 5 to 10 minutes with the actors, and then you and I will block it." And I said, "You know, I will promise you within a couple of days, you'll know how to block a scene." And it was, because it's not that difficult to me. And we got on like a house on fire. It was a wonderful, wonderful movie. Wonderful movie. And Tony did a good job. I did another movie for him after that, which wasn't so good. I mean, not what it wasn't so good. It didn't turn out the way it should have done. You know?
And at the time when you were coming up in the industry, who were the DPs that you looked towards, that you really idolized?
Well, obviously, Freddie Young, who.
And why is that?
Well, I mean, he shot some incredible movies. Jeff Unsworth, another, mostly British DPs, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Unsworth is another DP. Dougie Slocum, Ozzie Morris, you know, all great DPs that go back to some of them went back to the Technicolor days, you know, for the dye transfer process. You know, I was lucky enough to work with some of them, and they took me under their wing, and that's where I learned. I really learned that. Now you can't, like I said before, you can't do that anymore. So film school is a really good option. I mean, you know, and especially at NYFA, where we have an incredible MFA program going out in Los Angeles. You know, and all of my teachers there are all working members of the A.S.C members. You know,
Totally, totally.
But the interview process is, I mean, everybody's different. So I can, you know, I would always start off with just chatting, you know, how are you, blah, 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 where are you living, you got kids, and you start talking about that. And then it seemed to me the most important thing is to get out of him how he wants his movie to look before he asks me how his movie should look. Because, you know, if you say, so I would always, after this friendly chat, I'd suddenly say, listen, the script's great. How do you want the movie to look or feel? Because if he'd asked me that question first and I said it should look this way, blah, 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 and it wasn't what he had in mind, you're not going to get the job.
Right, right.
That's what I thought. So that's the way. Now, I'm sure every other DP is different. Some go in with drawings, some go in with sketches. I never did that, you know.
And did you work or do you work all the time with the same crew, or are you flexible? Did you have your first be all, you know, travel with you? How did you?
Well, I worked a lot with the same crew, certainly when I was in Los Angeles, but most of my work was either done abroad or in our states. Now, you know, you're fighting all the time to take a crew because they want you to use local crew, you know. So sometimes you take an operator, sometimes they take an assistant, the first assistant. You know. And I operated a few movies on my own, but it didn't seem to be. I quite liked it, but it didn't seem to be beneficial for the time constraints. I mean, you're still, you know, and being British, we rely on our operators much more than Americans do. And directors like that. I mean, obviously you're still in charge of the composition and whatever, but you let him work with the director on the compositions and things. You're overseeing it, and it gives you time, or gave me time as a dean to think ahead all the time, to think ahead, because you know time is the biggest factor in making movies. You know.
Is your disposition go more towards camera or more towards lighting?
Well, both. I mean, obviously, the DP's main job is the lighting. You know, a lot of young students think that the gaffer does the lighting. Well, the gaffer doesn't do the lighting. The DP does the lighting. He just tells the gaffer what to do. But then, of course, what happens is after the time. I mean, I always try to use the gaffer out, and I could only use him when I was on the East Coast or out of Los Angeles. A guy called Russ Engels. He's been a gaffer for years, years and years and years. And he is without a shadow of doubt the best gaffer I've ever worked with. And we have you know, and I love working with Russ. He runs a very tight ship with his crew, and we just have a wonderful time together. I have about 8 pictures with Russ Engels, and it's lovely. I mean, you have a wonderful understanding. He comes up with ideas, you know, and we know what each other's doing, you know.
But so when you go into a foreign country, how do you go about winning over the crew so they're working for you, not against you, let's say?
Well, like I don't know. I mean, I did a movie in Ravenous, which you've got to see. It's a very, very dark comedy, and very, very bizarre. It's one of my favorite movies, actually, believe it or not. And when it came out, 20th Century Fox took it off after 3 days because they thought the movie was disgusting, because it deals with the Donner Party, and there's a tiny, tiny reference to cannibalism in it, which is sort of a potent, you know. And you know, I had a foreign crew there, and so I went out very quickly. The director and I didn't prep the movie because we both, the other director and the DP had been fired, and we just started shooting. I got there on a Sunday afternoon in Prague, and we started shooting the next morning. I had a crew working overnight to change the rigging they put up on the set, and we just started shooting. And I knew within like the first 2 shots, the operator was no good. So I bought an operator out from London the next day, but I didn't fire the other guy. I put him on B camera. So you know, and I try not to use B camera very often. I mean, DPs don't like B cameras. I mean, I think B camera when you've got kids, because they never do the same thing twice, and also for a comedy you can use B camera a lot, but not on a drama, because you can't lie for 2 cameras.
And so when you replace, or when you put them down to B camera without firing them, was that like part of your managing the crew, basically?
Yeah, I mean, you don't like to fire people, you know. I mean, and I have to say, in Czechoslovakia or Prague, the Czech Republic, the crews are fantastic. I
Mhm.
mean, and they've all been to film school, and there's an incredible love of movies, you know. And it was a very happy time, you know.
That is, and that's part of the fun of is traveling to foreign countries, is getting to know
Right.
the local crews, and because they have such artistry and long culture of filmmaking.
I mean, the great thing for me was I did a lot of movies with my sons. I mean,
Mm.
I managed to get them green cards years ago, and they lived here, and we did about 9 pictures together. So one would be the operator, one would be the focus puller, and I never felt like the dad. I felt like we were 3 brothers, and I was the middle brother, you know. But it was a wonderful experience, you know. It's so
That-
nice when you can work with your kids, you know, and it's hard for them coming up with a, you know, I mean, I got a bit of a reputation, you know, and they've made it, you know, in spite of me, which is fabulous, and they deserve it, you know.
that is amazing. This must feel, you must be very, very proud.
I'm really proud of them, yeah.
Yes. So we have a bunch of questions. I'm going to just jump in with a few and we'll see where we go.
Okay.
So Rick asks, how do you make the jump to the next level as DP? I've been fortunate to shoot short films that have been well received, and even my first feature, but how do you continue moving up the ladder?
Well, I mean, people have got to see your work. I mean, and that's the thing. You got to get an agent, get that work out there. It's hard to move up the ladder. I mean, a lot of that's why you know, a lot of people are not moving up now. Certainly in America, I mean, the focus pullers are not moving up to operator because unless you know what used to happen was when someone retired or died, you jump up one, but that doesn't happen anymore because people are, you know, some of the jobs are so highly paid. They like a focus puller may not want to go to an operator because he doesn't want to have maybe 6 months or a year out of work, you know. And focus was a very highly paid job. So you've got a lot of people staying in the same position. A lot of incredible operators don't want to be DPs because, you know, they don't want that responsibility.
Mhm.
But I like the responsibility.
Well, it's also then you have a creative say so in the vision.
You do, absolutely. You're a very, very strong creative say so. And it's also, listen, the best thing about it is I think that I try to tell the students, you know, once again, this is only my opinion, so other people have a different. I think to be a successful cinematographer, it's not a job; it's a way of life, and
Mhm.
you've got to be prepared for that. I mean, I have to say the number of times I've missed graduations and birthdays of my kids because I've been abroad somewhere, but it is a way of life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, my wife used to think I was a workaholic, but I don't think I'm a workaholic. I just love work. You know, I love work. It is a way of life. And it's exciting. It's an exciting job, you know. And it's wonderful to take chances too when a director lets you take chances, you know.
Well, it's also everybody loves to be MacGyver and they love to figure things out. And the
Right.
more challenges, the more interesting it becomes because then you have to really work and then do the teamwork to
Yeah,
figure
I
out.
mean, I think listen, the bottom line is I always look after my crew. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if there's a mistake, I don't ever fire anybody, you know. And because it's my responsibility. I mean, I made one terrible mistake once. I tried a new gaffer, and on literally day 2, I know I'd made a terrible mistake, but I didn't fire him because I'd made that choice. I hadn't done my homework, you know.
And what would have your homework been?
Well, call around, check people. You know, I just liked a couple of the movies he'd gaffed on, but then in the end, you don't really know whether it was the DP or him that did it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't fire him because I don't think that's right, you know.
But did it hurt the work?
No, not at all. I just had to work a bit harder.
And are you a DP that calls your lights or does not call your lights? And maybe we can explain what call your lights
Oh,
means.
yeah, I call my lights. Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. I mean, and unless I'm working with Russ Lister or a gaffer I work with a lot, he knows what I want, you know. So, and I tell him where to put them and things like that, you know. And you know, if I can't get my own key grip that I've used a lot, I get the gaffer to recommend key grips that he likes working with. It's teamwork, you know.
Exactly, exactly. So Jacqueline asks, do you read the script and discuss your view and viewpoint with the directors? My instinct would be to go in with the DPI. And that's sort of going back to like when you read the script, how are you educating? Maybe you like the director, but maybe you think the script could be even better if it went in this direction. How do you educate the director there?
Well, that's a really tough question, because that totally relies on the director's personality. I mean, you're going to get once you've got the job and you're in prep, things are very, very different, and you know how things are going to go. And as I say, I've been lucky, and I've always worked with directors that have got an idea, they like it or don't like it. But if they don't like it, they don't hate me for that. You know, I mean, it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration. I mean, I think a director has 3 collaborations. I mean, the first one is with the production designer, because he's on before the DP. And then once the DP comes on, then that collaboration is just with the DP and everything else is forgotten. And then when the movie is shooting, he has an incredible collaboration with the editor,
What is it? What are some of the moments that you can recall that you were very anxious about seeing the dailies the next day?
Well, actually, there's one in the movie Ravenous where the guy has to falls into a pit, like a bear pit, and there's suddenly a dead body comes in on top of him, and he can't get out. And it was a transition scene, so it was day and it was night, and it was day and it was night, and I just never knew what it was going to be. So I was worried until I saw dailies, but it sort of worked out okay, and we managed to correct all my misgivings in color correction.
And did you, when you were coming up and you were just in your first couple films, how did you, I guess, gain your confidence, or act as if you were confident, even though it was?
Well, I think one of the things that helped my confidence, I was a freelance clapper boy, and the first movie I ever worked on was called Call Me Bwana, with Bob Hope and Anita Ekberg, and that was shot by an incredible British DP called Ted Moore, who was a brilliant DP, but he was a really grumpy man. And then I found out that he was going to do From Russia with Love, and somehow I got his telephone number. Excuse me. And I decided to call him, and he answered the phone, and I said who I was, and I said I worked for a couple of days on Call Me Bwana. He said, yeah, what do you want? I said, well, you're doing From Russia with Love, and I'd like to be on your crew. He said, okay. So that gave me a lot of confidence, because there was a man who was really grumpy and really uptight about everything. I mean, basically, he was great in the mornings, but not very good after lunch, because he used to drink too much at lunchtime. But he was a brilliant DP, and he once again he took me under his wing. And then I was lucky enough that I got in with Nick Rogue, and then I did a lot of 2 or 3 movies as a clapper boy with him, and then he made me a focus puller, and then we went off and did Dr. Zhivago. And once again, that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because you're doing a movie which is be impossible to make now. I mean, it just would be impossible. I mean, you couldn't make it like that anymore. No visual effects. We shot for 52 weeks.
Wow.
52 6-day weeks. And Nick Rogue had got fired by David Lean after a month. And in those days you left. If the DP got fired or left, you left with the crew, left with him. But as all the rest of the camera crew were from Lawrence of Arabia, Nick said, I've got to stay on. So I stayed on. And I really didn't like David Lean. And someone told him that. So he went out of his way, and he could be quite miserable, David. He went out of his way to take me under his wing. And I learned so much about filmmaking. He is truly a master filmmaker.
Oh, incredible.
Master filmmaker. I mean, not only in terms of story, not only in terms of performance. I mean, an incredible, impeccable eye. You know, every shot, every single shot was thought out. You know, there's no just, oh, quick, put the hammer here and shoot it. You know, sometimes we do 2 shots a day. Sometimes you wouldn't shoot. I mean, that movie was so huge. I can't. It's hard to explain how big it was. I mean, we had a crew of 350, and any student today will have more camera equipment on their thesis film than we had on Dr. Zhivago.
Wow.
We had one BNC camera, 4 Panavision lenses. That's all they made in those days. You know, a 40, 50, 75, and 100, and a sort of a old 2C Ariflex with 3 lenses and an anamorphic front, and that was it. And that's how we shot that movie.
Wow.
You know, I don't know whether you've ever seen Chicago, but it's an amazing movie.
Oh, incredible. So what are like maybe a few of your top takeaways from that have lasted with you?
Well, I mean, I don't know, almost. Or I mean, I think the takeaways is what was watching David work, with the actors, watching how he got a performance out of the actors. He was a very tough director. I mean, he at times he treated actors like marionettes. You know, they would do it his way or the highway. But it was just how he explained and getting out of them what he wanted without them sort of feeling he was telling them what to do. I mean, if that makes any sense to you.
Totally.
And
Masterful.
so, I mean, that was a wonderful experience. That was just just wonderful, 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 wonderful.
Well, especially being that close to the action that you weren't buried
No, right.
59 in the back, that you
I mean,
could
very
actually.
different then. I mean, everybody's, you know, how the set was run was so different. I mean, first of all, you know, you'd line up the shot and then the DP would light. And that's it. No one would dare walk in front of the camera while the DP was lighting. The AD kept the set absolutely quiet. Well, now it's totally different. It's rushing all over the place. You know, that sort of drives me crazy. And you know, it was just that's just the way it worked. And then you know, when you were shooting, I mean, there was the operator, the director, and the focus puller by the camera. Director would be looking over the operator's shoulder. The script supervisor would be sitting on a box underneath the camera. I'd be there as a clapper boy. And then standing about 4 feet behind them, us would be the hair and makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, nowadays it's all different. I mean, everybody's around monitors. Hair and makeup are sitting by a monitor, looking at on their cell phones. You have to call them when you want. It's just a different way of filmmaking. I mean, I'm not saying that was the better way. It's just different today. You know, it's
And
much harder today.
how would you, like, for film students, especially ones coming to, the wonderful program that you're running, the MFA program in cinematography, which we have on both coasts, what would you say to aspiring students, how they can get the most maximum out of their film education?
Well, as well as doing the work at school and the education, watch a lot of movies. And, you know, I would tell them to watch movies that are not superhero movies. I mean, I don't, for me, they're all rubbish. I don't like any superhero movie. I saw the first Iron Man. I thought it was the biggest load of crap I'd ever seen. There's absolutely no way I would ever watch Wonder Woman. But watch movies that are older than 20 or 30 years old. When a DP had to do it right,
Mm-hmm.
you had to do it right. I mean, you had to get your exposure right, because there's nothing you could do. There's nothing you could do in color correction. You could just time it, you know. You can, and there was in the middle of the scale, there was 8 printer lights to a stop. If you're going over or underexposed, you might get, you know, one printer light to a stop, so you can't fine tune it, you know. So DP had to, and that's an interesting time, you know. But they don't like, the students don't really like to look at old films, you know. But they should do.
Not, yes. I mean, I think there's, many of them are that obsessed and excited about it, and seeing that you can't fix it in post, or then you could not fix it in
That's
post.
right, right. You had to do it right.
And
Otherwise, you got fired.
and there is something beautiful and wonderful that, you came up through apprenticeship, and that students can go find, they at least, DPs are very accessible, I find.
Right.
Um, and they love talking shop, and
Absolutely.
it's a great thing. You can reach out to people.
That's right.
Um, they're not like,
I've always given people breaks too. I've taken a classical and made them focus for, I've taken a focus and made them opera. I've always given people breaks. I believe in that.
mhm,
And the other thing is why I like teaching is it's like it's really giving back. I mean, in my experience, I can give back what I've learned. Whereas, I was helped so greatly as a young man. And I've had listen, I'm very lucky. I've had a wonderful career, and it's been an amazing amount of fun. And I've shot some good movies. I've also shot some, I've shot some excellent movies, some very good movies, some okay movies, and a couple of stinkers. They don't start out to be bad. They all start out to be really, really good. But something happens. Not necessarily the DP, just something happens to the film.
mhm.
It doesn't quite click.
Exactly, exactly. So in our last minutes, I have a question for you. If there was any other career in the world that you would have chosen, what would have that been, Anthony?
Uh, I wouldn't have chosen anything else. I don't think I would have done. That's all I ever wanted to do. I never thought about doing anything else, and I was very lucky. Coming up the way I did, I was very lucky to make it. I can't think of another career I'd want to do.
Well, it's luck
I know
and
it's not a
perseverance
bad,
and
it's
craft.
not a good answer, but I'm sorry about that.
No, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. But also, even that when you talked about calling your, a hero DP of yours to work on their film as an assistant, that is persistence. That's taking action. That's advocating for yourself. That's, putting yourself
You've got
out.
to advocate for yourself. You have to.
Well,
And any young student who's becoming a DP. I mean, the great thing about film school is you have a Rolodex of numbers. I mean, you while you're at film school, you'll shoot some movies for a filmmaking director, and maybe a short, and that gets a little bit of notoriety. He goes on to something bigger. You go with him, and things like that. You're also working. We have students who pull focus on some AFI films,
mhm,
for their students. So you're getting a great, and that's the beauty of film school.
exactly. It is definitely worthwhile. Well, sorry to say that we are at the end of our time. This was amazing.
Well, I
And
hope so. I
you
mean,
were great.
I
You were,
hope.
I learned a lot, and I really want to thank you for taking the time
No,
to.
it's wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And where can people find you, Anthony, if they want to, I don't know, email you
My
or,
email is tony.richmond, TONY RICHMOND at NYFA.edu. And anybody can email me at any time.
oh, that's wonderful.
I'd give you my cell phone number. They'd be calling in the middle of the night. I don't want
Your wife wouldn't like that very much now.
that.
Okay, yeah, we put it in the chat for everybody who has questions or questions about the NYFA program.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Yeah. And if they want to know about the knife, I can always arrange for a Skype call
Oh, that's wonderful.
or FaceTime or whatever they want to do.
Fantastic. And that's it. Thank you, New York Film Academy, for the 2020 series and having it air with you guys. And everyone be safe and Happy New Year. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Liz,
Bye.
and you be safe and Happy New Year and have a good time in New York. The weather's beautiful here in LA today.
Thank God.
All
Exactly.
right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.